Dak Prescott hurt?
Tanking for Cooper Flagg after his performance against Team USA, Reese Hines.
Kansas looking for a move outside of the Big 12.
The Locked On Podcast Network presents the Big 6 in 60. The 6 biggest national sports stories from the local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Get the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 60 minutes. The Big 6 in 60 starts now with the biggest story in sports.
4th of July was here on, Thursday? And I'm just hanging around the house, getting ready to go to a party. And somebody just randomly sends me a picture of Dak in a boot. And I'm like, oh no. And then about a couple hours later, we see another picture come up on social media of Dak walking around. It looks like it was in Cabo, I believe, where you were at.
Cabo.
Maybe this is
all
Cabo.
Yeah, it was funny because, like I had said, I had just gotten back from Cabo 2 weeks earlier, so I was a little upset that I missed him. But yes,
right. So by the time I drove to the party that I was going to, Landon, the big networks, including ESPN, already were talking about this. Like, that's how fast things happen. So in case you missed it, yes, Dak Prescott into a boot. The reports are nothing serious, nothing major. But what were your instant thoughts when you heard this news?
Well, I mean, let me tell you my side of the story. My side of the story is I was also enjoying the 4th of July. I was down at the parade, and I got a DM from you saying, "Hey, have you seen this this picture going around?" And as soon as I got the DM, about 3 minutes after that, you sent me the picture, and then about 3 minutes after that, all the major networks had started tweeting it out and started referencing it and everything. So, and really, it started quote tweeting you with the picture of people posting it. So, I mean, look, my first initial thought was, man, Cowboys quarterbacks are just simply not allowed to go to Cabo anymore. Like, it's just completely off the vacation menu from now on. But Jerry's got to shut down the city of Cabo. I don't know what they got to do, but get the Cowboys quarterbacks away from Cabo. Look, I mean, obviously, the first thing we want to know is, when did this happen? What happened? You know, what's the timeline of an injury? Is it an injury? And I think that these are all things that, you know, kind of came out over time. You know, a little bit more information is kind of leaked out about what's going on. But I think most of the time, you know, we see these pictures. You know, there's tons of time before a regular season game is going to be played, but when we just tend to panic because he's our quarterback in a boot, and the truth of the matter is that these guys do, like, you know, all kinds. This is the kind of concept of the medical care that these guys get, you know, versus what we get, right? Like, these guys are putting on boots when their feet swell. They're taking MRIs when their leg doesn't quite feel right because they have access to that kind of stuff. So I think my initial thought was, it feels like if this was a major thing, we would know more about this already. We wouldn't be discovering it, you know, through a picture of someone walking around in Cabo. But you just never know. So I was glad to kind of get some assurance as the kind of information started to leak out a little bit.
All right, so I can kind of put together a timeline on what happened here. There's been a lot of noise, and listen, I think Dak enjoys this because he makes up some, like, random excuses. Oh, my ankle just swells when I go in the water.
I couldn't believe, like, it's Dak Prescott, the quarterback of the Cowboys, clearly has a PR team, you know? Like, I mean, clearly.
Or he is the PR team, right?
Yeah, exactly. It was just hilarious to me that the reason that they released was the swelling foot fishing excuse, which, of course, we all get swelling foot when we go fishing. I think that's a very common thing that we. I thought swelling was supposed to happen when you go up in elevation, not when you go down to ski level. That's okay. Anyway, so give us a timeline on this.
So again, I talked to 2 people, one who would know, and another person who is around the situation. That, again, a lot of this is hearsay, but this is what we've heard. This is during OTA, so this is before minicamp. So this picture is actually kind of old. Right. So he wasn't in Cabo last week. This was actually a couple of weeks ago.
So he was probably there when I was there, is what you're saying.
And I might have been. So what happened? He got stepped on in an OTA practice. And because Mike McCarthy is so cautious with injuries, he goes and gets an MRI, which, again, if you have a hangnail, Mike McCarthy is going to force you to go get an MRI. The MRI came back clean. It is his right ankle, which that's the ankle that he injured back in 2020. And I think anybody with a previous injury knows this. Like if you have a bad foot and you just kind of walk on it the wrong day, it might swell up and it might be
Yeah.
painful for a day or two, but it's not a long-term injury. I also know with Dak trains so incredibly hard that these kind of things come up, and it's not a long-term thing. It's more of a maintenance thing. So maybe it was bothering him for a day or two. He decides to throw the boot on just to be cautious. So because he knows he's going to be walking a lot, it's nothing to be worried about. Like this is just kind of stuff that happens as you recover from a major injury like Dak did 3-4 years ago. I'm not worried about it at all.
No, and to be fair, I have one of these kind of ankles. I heard it, in high school, and it's just one of those things where, yeah, like stupid things do make it. So I did make the joke about it swelling up, but the truth is, the matter is that like putting weird action on it can help make it swell up. The change in the weather can make it swell up. Mine turns underneath me all the time without my doing. So, yeah, it's just keeping it in a stabilized boot. Again, like we said, it's like when you have access to these kind of resources, you use them for little to no reason at all, just to be cautious. Because why not, right? Why not avail yourself? Like it's like having the MRI machines on site in your practice facility. Why wouldn't you have Dak put his leg in there for a little while to see?
Which, by the way, the MRIs came back clean. We heard a mild foot sprain. I mean, you know that way is you play basketball and you roll your ankle once and it's a sprain, but you can still play on it. And maybe it swells up and you ice it for a day and you're right back onto the court. I think it's something like that. So again, this is like let me put it this way. If Dak did this on a Wednesday practicing for a game on Sunday, he wouldn't even be listed as questionable. Sunday.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the other thing too. There's this phenomenon that we kind of talk about, right? And this is something that's good to talk about as we get into training camp, right? Is the idea of a training camp injury, or being training camp injured and being game day injured, right? Those are
Totally
two
different.
very different concepts, right? Like when there's no value in, well, not value, let's help it this way. There's no upside to you being on the field when you're injured in a training camp practice. They're not going to put you on a training camp field of practice. In a regular season, that's a different situation, and this is even more so, right? We're not even at training camp yet, so of course they're going to have Dak in the most protective bubble wrap thing, because they just want to get him ready to be comfortable to get through training camp practices. So let's not forget that, even more so when there's nothing on the line for these guys, they are very quick to put them in bubble wrap, take them off the field, be a little bit more protected for with their health, because there's, all downside to them getting injured. And, the upside is they miss a practice, they can get through it. It'll be okay. Yeah.
And the last thing I want to say here is, at least again, what I've been told, I could be wrong. I wasn't there. I didn't see it, but this was an OTA injury. The Cowboys had a portion of their mini camp open to the media, and Dak Prescott was practicing with no big issue. Now, somebody did, and it might have been Nick Harris from DallasCowboys.com, mentioned that he had some different types of shoes on during.
He did. Yeah. Nick Harris was the one who mentioned that.
Right. So maybe that's part of this as well. Like, hey, he's not wearing cleats. He's going to wear the flat tops, whatever.
I actually, real quick, just a point of notice. I think, was actually suggesting that the reason that Dak was potentially wearing those flat-footed shoes was because of the injury.
That's what I mean.
Yes. Is that Dak wears those flat-footed shoes to practice when he has a level of discomfort. I think probably going back to the recovery to the 2020 injury. So just a point of order there.
Lane, I want to ask you about Dak Prescott's health in general, because Dak has dealt with several major injuries, including foot injury in 2020, the heel/ankle/Achilles injury in 2022. He had the shoulder injury, I believe it was in 2022. And then 2021, he had the shoulder injury. 2021 was the ankle injury. 2022 was the thumb injury. Are you worried that the injuries are starting to pile up a little bit?
Sure. I mean, actually, one of the first thoughts I had when this picture came down was, man, it feels like 2020 all over again, right? In the sense that what a ill-timed injury for all parties involved, right? Especially, potentially Dak Prescott. Obviously, this is, as we've kind of come around on, this isn't as big a deal. This is not really a deal. But, when we didn't know anything, when it could have been anything, my mind went to this would have been just an absolutely terrible timed injury again for Dak Prescott in his bid to kind of go through this contract negotiation. I mean, not that he wouldn't end up getting paid like he did last time, but it I think it takes some of the shine off of your potential negotiation if you're, once again injured in the same ankle injury that you famously missed a good portion of a season with. So I think that it is something to consider. I mean, I think this ended up being more of a fluke situation and not so much of a re-aggravation or anything like that. But it does bring your mind back to the thought that obviously Dak has had injury issues in the past. It seems like it's been mostly behind him as of last year. But I mean, that kind of thing is certainly, likely or possible to crop up again, especially as he continues to get older. And I think the thing that kind of really made Dak a even better quarterback last year than the year previous to that was a kind of a return to mobility, right? Another year away from that kind of foot injury, and you start to see a little bit more of the Dak Prescott that you saw a little bit earlier in his career. Not so much that he was, doing a lot more schemed runs, though we wanted to see more and more of that, but just getting out of the pocket and being able to create with his legs out of the pocket in order to throw the football. I think that that's a huge part of Dak's game. And I think he is a very good pocket passer, but when you limit his mobility, you take away one of the better aspects of his game. Yep. So I think that there are concerns here. I mean, it just kind of reminded you that Dak is someone that has been injured in the past and that has had an effect on his game. So I think that there are, concerns, not necessarily with this injury, but it did remind you that hey, this is something that definitely could happen. It's happened with him before. And if it does happen, man, it really throws a lot of monkey wrench. It throws a really big monkey wrench in a whole bunch of people's plans, not even just Dak Prescott's. I mean, not even necessarily just the Dallas Cowboys. So I think it would be pretty huge news for all around the league.
I'm going to preface this by saying we haven't heard anything about the Cowboys not wanting to sign Dak to a long-term deal. Everybody says that, or Stephen Jones, Jerry Jones talking about how much they want Dak to be back.
That's right.
But do you think there is a part of them that believes, or maybe looks back at how the Tony Romo era ended? That third contract for Romo. When you knew Romo had an injury history, that makes them a little cautious about giving a quarterback like Dak, who has somewhat of an injury history, going into the third part of his contract, a new deal.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, let's take it back even a step from this, right? Like, I think the Cowboys, one of the reasons that they're so, kind of still so shell-shocked about shopping in free agency or signing their own early like they used to, is that they had a series of contracts that kind of didn't work out for them and ended up being like real albatrosses around their necks. So keeping that in mind, I think that they look at the Tony Romo situation as from last time and they look and see how much that really hampered them. And if you don't think it did, I think that you need to kind of go back to have you ever yelled at the Joneses for not taking advantage of Dak Prescott's rookie contract when he was there? And I think that a good portion of the reason that the Cowboys weren't able to kind of exploit that situation the way that other teams that had quarterbacks on rookie deals is because they had a deal with Tony Romo that they were still having to pay. And I think ultimately, they kind of regretted, not regretted, they wanted Tony, but I mean, you signed him to a whole bunch of money. You gave him a huge deal. And that last deal, he, basically consistently got injured to the point where obviously Dak Prescott came in and took the job. So if you think that isn't, similarly, hanging around their necks the way that they feel like the Jalen Smith and Ezekiel Elliott contracts were, and the way they feel about re-signing their own early, I think it's having an effect. I think it does have an effect on how the Cowboys feel. And I don't think that it's going to be enough to completely sway them from
I don't think so
from
either.
Signing Dak. But I think there's a reason that that there's some pause here. There's a reason that it's not just like full steam ahead with the Brinks truck. And I think, ultimately this will get done, I feel like. But I think the people that that don't look at this situation and say that the Cowboys have no reason to be hesitant here. I mean, I think if you examine the situation, there is some stuff that makes you kind of, think twice before you guarantee more money to this guy than anybody in the history of the NFL.
I'm really curious to see what happens, because maybe the Cowboys just want to see how this season plays out from a health perspective, not even a caliber of play, because I feel confident, and I'm sure they feel confident. If Dak plays all 17 games, he's going to play well. He's going to put up big numbers. But if I told you that Dak is going to miss 4 games with an injury, I'm not even going to tell you what it is.
Yeah, whatever.
I think you start to get a little bit worried, like, hey, now he's missed games in, 3 of the last 4 seasons or 4 of the last 5 seasons. Is this somebody that, as he gets older, is going to get healthier, or is it going to be more of the same, where we can just expect him to miss 3, 4, 5 games at a time? And again, I'm not saying that the Cowboys are thinking that way, but I think you'd be foolish not to at least examine it a little bit.
No football, no NBA, no problem with FanDuel. With baseball, the WNBA, and soon the Olympics, there's plenty to dive into over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone, every day, all season long. And there's a marquee pitching matchup tonight in Baltimore. The Chicago Cubs pitch Shota Imanaga up against the Baltimore Orioles ace Corbin Burns. Because of this, FanDuel has the total runs over under set at 8.5. And the Orioles are favored to win the money line at -168. So what are you waiting for? Head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partners of Major League Baseball.
Let's discuss this series with the Dodgers now, because this is a huge series. I know it might feel like there's a certain malaise surrounding this team right now because of the lack of Bryce Harper, lack of Kyle Schwarber, lack of JT Realmuto. We've hit this point of the season where it's just like, okay, they're still the best team in baseball by record. They're still winning regularly-ish, but this isn't the team that we're going to be watching. They're missing so many guys. It's hard to get excited about this team. This is a series to get excited about one way or another, just like that Atlanta Braves series. Now, I'll say the same thing that I said to you about the series against the Atlanta Braves. The outcome of the series is not going to affect my view of this team one way or another. It's just not. And that doesn't mean you can't be excited. It doesn't mean you shouldn't be excited. It doesn't mean you shouldn't be in front of your television at 6:40 p.m. tonight as Zach Wheeler takes the mound and say, oh my goodness, this is high-level baseball that I need to watch. It absolutely should be. Anytime Shohei Ohtani's playing, anytime you've got a team the caliber of the Dodgers, a team the caliber of the Phillies, they're facing off. If you're going down to Citizens Bank Park, God bless you. It's hotter than the HE double hockey stick outside, but my goodness, this is one of those series that you wait all season for. Unfortunately, the Phillies aren't that healthy for it, unless you get the news that Schwarber and Harper are back, which still nothing on that front at this time. But it's still a big series to get excited about. It's just not one that's going to affect my view of the Philadelphia Phillies, and here's why. If the Philadelphia Phillies were to go out in this series against the Dodgers and they were to get swept, what would happen? They would still be the best team in the National League by a half game, close to the All-Star break. Now, based on where they were projecting to be about a month ago and where that would put them now, it would be a downturn. You would have a very valid reason for that downturn occurring, which is the injuries that happened to Harper, Schwarber, Realmuto. So you lost 3 big players. You've held your own. If you can't compete with the Dodgers in this series, I'm not going to lose faith in the Philadelphia Phillies as a great team. You just saw what happened against the Atlanta Braves. The offense for the Philadelphia Phillies right now is partially non-existent. You're going to have games where if you have Brandon Marsh batting cleanup and the bottom half of your lineup all batting like 200 or below, you're going to have a really hard time competing. That's what you saw against the Braves in the series finale down in Atlanta against Reynaldo Lopez, a shutout by the Braves pitching staff. It just wasn't the Phillies' best possible lineup, but it's what they had to work with. You could see that depending on who's available again in this series. So that's why I'm not putting up too much stock into it, right? What I will say is the pitching is set up very, very well for the Philadelphia Phillies. You got Zach Wheeler going tonight against Bobby Miller. Bobby Miller has not been good this year. In 25 innings pitched, he's got a 6.12 ERA. He's 1-1, a 1.6 WHIP. I mean, 25 strikeouts in 25 innings, cool. 25 hits given up in 25 innings. 5 home runs in 25. So he's given up a home run every 5 innings. He's given up a hit every inning. He's walked 15. Like, he's just not that good of a pitcher. Zach Wheeler, we know, has been outstanding, named to the All-Star team. We're going to run through more about the All-Stars besides the starters that we've already talked about, because it's been a little bit since I've been on here. We're going to talk about the All-Stars that made it for the Phillies in our final segment. But this game tonight should be a game that the Phillies dominate comparatively pitching-wise. Then you have Christopher Sanchez facing off against Gavin Stone in Game 2. And Gavin Stone's been pretty good record-wise. He's 9-2 record, but a 3.03 ERA. Christopher Sanchez, 2.96. I don't know. I look at that and I'm like, okay, that's a good pitching matchup. The Phillies could still have the advantage in that one as far as that's concerned. And then you get Aaron Nola against Landon Knack. The Dodgers aren't throwing their best guys in this series either, even though Landon Knack has a 2.86 ERA and 34 2/3 innings pitch. He's not one of those names you hear and you say, oh, wow, you got to face that guy. So pitching-wise, you match up well against him. You got Nola, you've got Sanchez, and tonight you've got Wheeler. That's a huge advantage for the Philadelphia Phillies. The issue is pitching's not the problem with this team right now. I know Ranger Suarez has had some weird bumpy starts lately. I know Zach Wheeler and Aaron Nola and Christopher Sanchez, the staff has had over the past 2 weeks some bumpy starts. I talked about this in an episode. You can go back and find it. It was like 2 weeks ago when these injuries first happened with Bryce Harper, Kyle Schwarber, JT Realmuto. Well, JT's happened before that. And I was talking about how the pitching staff has to step up, and you may see this pitching staff feel some of the pressure of having to carry this team. They may start pressing because the offense isn't as productive. They feel that they need to be perfect, not just good. It leads to them making mistakes. It leads to them trying too much, and now that pressure leads to a bit of lessened performance. And on top of that, they just weren't going to be Cy Young caliber pitchers, 4 of them, in the starting rotation all year long. It wasn't realistic. So maybe it's a bounce back series here for the Phillies pitching against the Dodgers. Maybe it's more of the same if you don't have Harper and Schwarber. And I don't know, but I'm not too concerned about this series. Let's talk expectations, because we saw from a pitching perspective that the Dodgers do not really have too much to be worried about on the mound from where you're sitting as the Phillies. But when you look offensively, of course, you still got to see Shohei Ohtani, Teoscar Hernandez, Freddie Freeman, Will Smith. You don't have to see Mookie Betts, who is still recovering from that broken hand, but they have a bunch of guys that are still really, really good. They're a quality stacked team. You're going to have to face one of the best lineups in baseball, even without Mookie Betts, and that's going to be a tough task for the Philadelphia Phillies pitching to contend with. It's also going to be a tough task for the Philadelphia Phillies offense to keep up with. So it's not exactly easy. I mean, all you have to do is look at what Ohtani's doing right now. He can wreck a game by himself. He's batting .314. He's at 28 home runs. He's got 65 RBIs. It's kind of miraculous that with this lineup and those numbers, he's only got 65 RBIs on the year, 48 walks. He does have 87 strikeouts, but 20 stolen bases to clearly lead the team as well. He's just a monster. That's why he's in the MVP conversation. That's why Bryce Harper needs to come back soon so Bryce Harper can win the MVP and not allow Shohei Ohtani to get another one. But that's just what you're up against. That's worth the price of admission. The other thing that I'm very interested in too, I'd love for you to let me know in the comments, who's going down to this series? Like, who's actually going to be at Citizens Bank Park? If you're listening to this and you are, let me know, and let me know if it's a, oh, well, I wanted to watch the Phillies, I wanted to get to a Wheeler game, or is it I wanted to see Ohtani, I wanted to see the Dodgers, I wanted to see a potential NLCS preview, I wanted to see one of the best matchups in baseball. To me, and I don't think it's remotely close. You know what? Maybe it's just because I don't like the Braves. I was going to say, to me, this is the much more intriguing matchup than that one against that series against the Atlanta Braves was. But part of that is because I've seen so much of the Braves versus the Phillies. I know how those teams stack up. It's a little bit less interesting to me than seeing what this version of the Dodgers with Shohei Ohtani, which we have not seen the Phillies play, the Dodgers with Shohei Ohtani yet. Like, this is what I'm most interested in when it comes to the series this year. So it's going to be a big one. It's going to be a star-studded couple of games at Citizens Bank Park, and the expectations are the same as the series with the Braves. If you win 2 or 3, or if you sweep the series, absolutely outstanding. That's an amazing effort. You feel very good about where the team is. If you win 1 of the 3 games, you did your job to hold the lead while missing 3 of like your top 5 bats. I'm totally accepting of the Philadelphia Phillies winning 1 of the 3 games against the Los Angeles Dodgers at Citizens Bank Park. I don't care that the series is at home. I don't care that you have the distinct pitching matchup. Your lineup is just so weak without some of these guys. Maybe that expectation changes if we get any news on Harper or Schwarber coming back, which I'm going to double check on right now as I continue to make this point. And as of a couple minutes ago, the Philadelphia Phillies have announced the following roster moves. Designated hitter Kyle Schwarber reinstated from the 10-day injured list. Outfielder David Dahl was designated for assignment. First baseman Bryce Harper reinstated from the 10-day injured list today. Cody Clemens optioned to AAA Lehigh. Schwarber, Harper, both available to play tonight. Would you look at that? See, you know what? I just told you that they shouldn't play, that they should wait until the All-Star break. And now I'm so excited that I get to watch Bryce Harper and Kyle Schwarber play baseball again. Like, that's amazing to me. It might not be the best decision, but this is why you do it. This is why you let them play, because those guys are such different makers. That's hugely, hugely exciting. So I guess we'll update our first segment. When should you see him back? Probably later than this. When are you going to see him back? Tonight. Tonight they return. That's great news. See, I'm glad I continued to check my phone so I could get you that information. So this will be the breaking news podcast. Maybe I'll have to insert a little something ahead of the episode. So either way, man, great to get that breaking news. Great to have those guys back. Screw it. You better win this series now. Let's do it. Take 2 or 3 out of the Dodgers.
The Dodgers rotation took another hit, albeit it might be for a shorter time than some of the other hits they've taken recently. But Tyler Glasnow was placed on the injured list with lower back tightness. Dave Roberts said it locked up on him a little bit Sunday. And we literally just talked about Glasnow on yesterday's episode. And if we were concerned about, him throwing as many innings as he has so far and not having done so in his career up to this point, and we both kind of said, yeah, we think at one point the Dodgers will give Tyler Glasnow a break. And, while back is nothing to play with, it does appear that this might be the break that we were talking about.
Yeah, and honestly, obviously, you don't want an injury to your ace of any kind, but I guess I'd take a back injury over an arm injury. Even though, as a Clayton Kershaw fan, I'm knocking on all the wood I can find as I say that. But the fact is Kershaw's arm injuries have been more devastating to the Dodgers than his back injury over the years. And yeah, hopefully it is just hey, Tyler, we've got the All-Star break next week. And that's the thing to remember. The 15-day injured list is 15 days, not 15 games. And that includes the All-Star break. And so it may have been a thing of, hey, Tyler, if you skip one start right now before the All-Star break, then you skip the All-Star game, 15 days from the 6th, which was the last time he pitched, that's what it's retroactive to. It means he's eligible to come back the Sunday after the All-Star break, eligible to. It could be as simple as we can put him on the IL right now and he really just misses one start and gets the full, like I said yesterday, 15 days off, and you spend the first 9 days not doing anything. And then you throw a sim game on day 10, and then you're pitching on day 15. It might be as simple as that. It's kind of the optimistic view because it's possible when you're that tall, that's a long back. There's a lot of things that can go wrong with that, especially when you're carrying a team like he has been. But it is, hopefully it's not a severe injury. I mean, hopefully it's not even an injury. It's hey, your back's probably sore, right? And that's what I'm going to keep my hopes on until we find out otherwise. Yeah,
obviously we're speaking with the hopes that this is what's going on rather than he's actually injured. But with what we've seen so far this season, with injuries at have coming back after 10 days, and then 3 months later still don't know when they're going to be back. I can imagine people being gun shy, and I'm fine with that if that is the case. So yeah, but for Glasnow, we'll see what happens. But if it is just kind of reset, take those 2 weeks off, I do wonder, for his sake, I would imagine he believes he's going to make another All-Star game at some point. I do wonder if he's going to still travel for the festivities and kind of be part of it. I think that honestly might be better, like to be part of the festivities, but knowing you don't have to play in it. I think that might be cool. But either way, he's going to get a break regardless from throwing. Maybe the Dodgers don't want him to travel, even though Texas isn't that far. But there is a lot of things going on when you do All-Star stuff, and you're maybe on your feet a little bit more than the Dodgers might want you to be.
Yeah, it could be. The flight itself, 2-hour flight, flying first class or charter plane or whatever, isn't that much to worry about. Kershaw's back injury originally started on a flight, but that was a 18-hour flight from Australia. But I assume he's going to want to take part and be there. And, if that's what he wants to, I hope he can do that. That might be a signal, because if his back is really hurting him, then I think there would be no way to let him do that. But if it is just it's July, something hurts, and we're going to use that something as an excuse to put him on the IL, then there's no issue with him being in Texas for the All-Star game, for the festivities. Because he's not young. He's in his 30s. And so making your first All-Star team in your 30s, there's no guarantee he's going to make another one. I guess it's a better chance now that he plays for the Dodgers. But there's no guarantee. So it is something that I hope he doesn't miss out on if it's something he wants to take part in.
Yeah, some people maybe had the thought that Glasnow's injury replacement would end up being Gavin Stone. That was not the case. It's Hunter Green from the Reds. There'll still be chances for Gavin Stone to be named an All-Star replacement. But I guess, I'm sure they have a list they maybe go down, or a manager. I don't know how it works once they get to replacements, but
I don't know for sure either. Hunter Green was apparently next in line. And who knows, I didn't even realize until today that Zach Wheeler had been named to the team, but before they even announced it, they had already replaced him, because he was scheduled to pitch Sunday. Now we'll see if he does. He left this game early with back issues, believe it or not. And so, who knows if that's going to be a serious thing for him. But if Gavin Stone does make it, I won't be heartbroken if he doesn't, because I do think he has All-Star games in his future. And I do like the idea of him not pitching during the All-Star break, because the Dodgers starting pitching has been rough lately, and I will take the break for everybody we can get. Because Stone pitches tomorrow, Wednesday, and then he won't pitch again before the All-Star break, which means if he doesn't pitch in the All-Star game, he's going to get at least 8 days off. And that's, that's awesome. Give him 8 days off, and it could be even more, because the Dodgers have 4 full days off for the All-Star break. So we'll see what they do. But the Dodgers starting pitching is not in the most enviable situation right now. And the main silver lining for me is that every single year, some team that sucked in July ends up winning the World Series, and except the Dodgers in 2020, because they didn't play in July. But every other year, the Rangers and the Braves and the Astros and everybody else, everybody goes through these stretches, and it ends up not meaning anything in October. The question is, can they get healthy and effective between now and October?
Game Time makes getting to the ballpark even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, and their best price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. They're obsessed with finding ways to help you save money on tickets. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event. Have you heard how many times I've said the word tickets? They're obsessed with them. Find exclusive flash deals and sponsored deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. There, I said it again. And the Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price on tickets. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the free app and new users can get $20 off their first purchase with code Locked On. Terms apply. That's code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase with Game Time. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, the lowest price guaranteed.
Your team might be looking to Cooper Flag, and you might be getting really excited about Cooper Flag because
they should be. Every team should be.
We already knew. I mean, he's the consensus number one pick for next year's draft, and nothing has changed anybody's mind because he went there as part of the USA select team, the youngest player there, 17 years old, and rolled through some of these established vets. Team USA. Okay, did Team USA play their absolute hardest? Maybe not, but it doesn't matter because when you're 17, you're out there dominating with no fear. That says something.
Look, the players spoke like glowingly about him, right? Like after the fact. And I think one of the things you and I probably both know this, right? Like these dudes have huge egos. They don't like to be embarrassed, right? Remember who was it that dunked on LeBron when he was in like high school or college, and then they did like everything they could to not let that video get out of LeBron at like a summer camp or something, right? Like they don't want that. They don't want to get lit up by a 17-year-old. That's not what they're trying to do. And for him, so like in some sense, no, they're not going like 1,000%, but it's not like they're like mailing this in either because they know how bad that would look. So this does say something, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, it says something. And now we wonder if it says more teams are going to tank. Let's play our favorite game here.
Is this real or fake? Just ask John and Jake.
Real or fake, Jake Madison? A lot more teams are going to get more into the Cooper Flag business here by trying to tank rather than trying to get better for this upcoming season after this.
Yeah, I think this is very real. When you look at a dude who's 6'9", going to Duke, and everyone already basically has him as the number one overall pick, and then he does that well as a 17-year-old, and he's going to get a year of really good development. I look at the West in particular with this, right? Like, there's a couple teams in the East that you're like, okay, they're going to be bad and they're tanking. Detroit's one of them. Right, Brooklyn's not going to be good. There's a couple other teams out there that's like, oh yeah, they're going to kind of be garbage. You know, the Wizards too. But in the West, it's what, Portland, and that's kind of it, is the only like real team that feels out of it. You have a team like Houston that's going to go for it. The Utah Jazz are kind of on the border of this. The West is going to be a bloodbath, and if you fall into a hole early, if you're Houston, if you're Utah, does that then maybe kind of spurn you to making a trade earlier in the season to just blow it up and realize like, yeah, we're not in the level of Minnesota or Denver or some of those other teams, so we need to retool here, and let's just start doing that now and get the jump on some of this, blow up our team, and then start tanking, you know, within a month of competitiveness, and then they give up?
Yeah, I think that might be where this answer is real, where a team that is you look at a mix that they've given a shot to, and you say, okay, this isn't working. Now I say this about Atlanta, who got the number one overall pick without having to tank necessarily. So this does add an element into this kind of discussion. How much do you actually have to tank to get the number one pick?
Well, like look at a team like Detroit, right? Like they've had the worst record basically 2 years in a row and didn't end up with the number one overall pick.
Right. So a team like Charlotte that has a new coach, a new staff that they poached from the Boston Celtics, and some, you know, hopefully some promise on that side. Even if they win 10 more games, that's a 31-win team. That's still worse than the Atlanta Hawks were last year. You're still in the mix for a guy like Cooper Flag. You know, the Brooklyn Nets, it maybe isn't really a surprise that they traded Mikal Bridges when they did, because you're like, okay, we're not going to go that far with, he's a good player, but let's get a haul for him. Let's tank now. Let's get a shot at Cooper Flag. If you get him, boom, you're back in the mix. And now you've got all of these picks to kind of support him as you go along. That's I think part of the equation, but like it's the middle of the season. Yeah. Like you said, maybe you a mix that you didn't think you were hoping that would work doesn't, and you say, all right, we're gonna move this guy. We are going to make the decision to tank rather than see this through, because the opportunity for a transformative player like Flag is just too good. You cannot, you gotta enter that sweepstakes and hope for the best. And I'm not a draft expert. I don't know who else is in the draft, but I do know that people are saying it's a deeper draft than, what we've seen. So there could be other players in there. It's not just Cooper Flag.
Right, like you've seen this past, like especially this past year where it was a weaker draft, right? No one like Victor Wembanyama, no one like Cooper Flag in it. Where it was teams last year were like, oh, let's go for it, let's go get to the playoffs, because like who cares about this pick nearly as much? I don't think you're going to see that in this draft. I think it might be like even on training camp, right? You kind of get in there, you look at your group of guys, and you're like, oh yeah, this ain't it. Like this isn't going to do it. Let's cash in while value is higher, right? Yeah, and you don't really see a ton of trades until the trade deadline. You won't see stuff till December 15th, January 15th, right? When you can start, when guys become trade eligible. I wonder if you'll still see, if Lauri Markkanen's not moved, and then you get, on the eve of the season starting, does a team be like, hey, okay, we'll do this. Like, we actually think we're closer. The Jazz are going to look at their roster and be like, oh yeah, in this Western Conference, like we don't stand a chance. This is when we need to retool it, right? Like, It's still a little early, I think, for teams to kind of evaluate where they're going to be. And once they start to do that, which comes around training camp, media day, preseason, I think that's when you'll see a team like I wouldn't be shocked if we have like a busier trade like November, December than we normally do, because teams are like, yeah, no, let's try and go get Cooper Flag. I do think, that Team USA scrimmage where look, like scouts were going to be there. NBA personnel was going to be there. Everyone's basically already in Vegas for a lot of this stuff anyway, with Summer League around the corner. I do think that was something that was going to be very eye-opening for a lot of folks. So the real question, John, is going to be like, what's the tagline for tanking for Cooper Flag?
I am going to go with the first name, and I'm going to go with like in the pooper for Cooper or something along those lines. I don't think there are any.
It's so good. It's so good.
I think in the pooper for Cooper is probably the best way to go.
No football, no NBA, no problem with FanDuel. With baseball, the WNBA, and soon the Olympics, there's plenty to dive into over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone, every day, all season long. And there's a marquee pitching matchup tonight in Baltimore. The Chicago Cubs pitch Shota Imanaga up against the Baltimore Orioles ace Corbin Burns. Because of this, FanDuel has the total runs over under set at 8.5. And the Orioles are favored to win the money line at -168. So what are you waiting for? Head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partners of Major League Baseball.
Kansas looking for a move outside of the Big 12. John, this was a big topic a couple of months ago. Greg Pflugar picked it up, and then John Kurtz talked about it this week, and then Josh Pate has had weird little inklings of the future of the Big 12 and what it could mean for teams that are leaving. And this is one that, had you said it 5 years ago, everybody goes point and laugh at that guy. Kansas, the worst football team in the country, going to the SEC or the Big Ten. But now, and especially from the perspective of a Kansas State guy who's been much better at football than Kansas the last 2 decades, crazy to think that we're in a conversation of the 2 biggest conferences in the country poaching the Jayhawks.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me along for the ride, Drake. But, the prevailing arguments I've been seeing from a lot of Kansas fans and a lot of KU pundits is that if the SEC comes knocking, you don't say no. Okay, fine. I understand where you're coming from in terms of the buyout that you will get to the SEC. I mean, would that help you in recruiting? Probably. Would that help you maybe claim an additional first-round pick in the long run? Possibly. But Drake, this is predicated on the idea that we're going towards these two super conference model with the SEC and the Big Ten, while the Big 12 will slowly fade off into irrelevancy. Now, that's what they said a few years back when Texas and Oklahoma bolted, but that didn't turn out to be true. It got better from a leadership and really a competitive standpoint as well, knowing how even a lot of these programs are. But let's just say, Drake, that we go towards a super conference system in the SEC and the Big Ten, all right? What you're going to run into is that Kansas will probably be allowed to go in there despite the exit fee and the bylaws. I haven't read too much into that yet, but because of its prowess and its blue blood status, they'll likely be more attractive compared to several other Big 12 schools. It's not me hating on the schools necessarily. It's just a fact of the matter, all right? What I do think is hilarious is that now is the time when Kansas is putting in the full investment into football and several other sports not named basketball, because we already know they can win in basketball except last year and year before. But we are going to invest in football, all right? We're going to start winning games. If you want to ensure that that you obliterate your football program and never have any kind of success beyond remote mediocrity again, go to the SEC. All right, let's be perfectly honest with ourselves. Even with the progress Kansas has made throughout the years, and I'll admit Lance Leipold is the right coach at Kansas. He's got the program moving in an upward trajectory, but there's a significant difference in having a 4-week stretch where you're playing Iowa State, BYU, Colorado, and Baylor, who none of those 4 teams have the 5-star offensive lineman. They don't have a 5-star defensive lineman. They don't have the 4.3 speed across the board. They just don't have any of that. And it's a whole different scenario when you go into a game in Sanford Stadium in Athens, Georgia, where you line up against linemen that are 6'8", 350 pounds, all of which who are first-round draft picks, who have a 4.8, 4.9 kind of speed. That's a monumental task. And it wouldn't just be for 1 week, Drake. It would be consecutively, except for that additional week where you run into a Vanderbilt or Kentucky. But ultimately, I think their basketball program will be fine in the long run because it's Kansas. But from a football standpoint, for a lack of better comparison, it's just like putting someone on death row. I'm just going to leave it at that.
The basketball deal here is from my perspective, I've always thought football is the moneymaker, that's the game changer, and truly it is. Now there are murmurs of TV networks like Fox and ESPN valuing even further what basketball can do for a school and how it can build your brand, right? We keep using the word brand. That's what it is. That's how you move. And expansion is having a strong brand. Do you think Kansas is strong enough in basketball only to wiggle its way into a bigger conference based off just that sport?
Well, from an SEC standpoint, looking at it from an SEC standpoint, Drake, is that you already have pretty much maximized the value you have with football with all of its perennial power brands. In order to continue finding ways to generate revenue, you're going to have to look at several ways, maybe not in the extreme Big 12 way where you're looking at private equity or naming rights changes to the conference, but maybe you're looking for some minor revenue league changes. And we've seen basketball really make its push lately in the media draws for everybody or TV eyeballs. I mean, that's mainly been one of the reasons why I think UConn could be a pretty serviceable candidate along with several ACC schools just because of that basketball brand and that prowess. And I've been banging on the drum for quite some time that they should be a candidate. I digress. But, the SEC and Greg Sankey may also see the basketball value as well by not only looking at a school like Kansas, but you're also looking at additional basketball teams like a North Carolina or Virginia, who constantly get brought up in the latest conference realignment talks because, one, the ACC has pretty much in doom's gloom. And 2, you're also looking at 2 additional Southeastern markets in North Carolina and Virginia that the SEC has not necessarily gotten towards yet. But you get those 2 schools, maybe you add in a Duke, and then if you add a Kansas all of a sudden, that really just speaks volumes to how loaded the basketball will be, because now you got a Kentucky program that's there as we'll see what Mark Pope's able to do. John Calipari's now in Arkansas. That is going to be that's going to be a lot of TV eyeballs. That's going to lean towards in Fayetteville. Alabama's been good. Auburn's been great. I mean, if Sankey is starting to see more of this basketball approach, it would not shock me one bit if Kansas does get considered as an expansion candidate in the near future. But it really, from an overall standpoint, if you want to, in the event that these two super conferences come up, Drake, in which they are having these conversations, all right, so they can hedge their bets, because that's where the pundits seem to be thinking that's where college sports is trending towards. You're likely going to get that invite anyways because of the prestigious basketball program in Lawrence. All right, I get that point. Out of all the realignment rumors, a lot of things are starting to run rampant. But if you're Kansas, it boils down to two options, in my opinion. One, you ensure that you will receive a paycheck while becoming the proverbial doormat of the SEC, or you can stay, continue to win in basketball against several perennial Big 12 basketball brands in Arizona, Houston, and Baylor, while proving yourself even more valuable on the football side of things, where you might end up being a mid-tier SEC program like Missouri and Arkansas have become. I think that's the route Kansas will likely choose. I mean, time will tell about what will occur in all of this realignment, but I do think they're starting to become a little bit more of a narrative push with basketball. And on top of that, what we've seen so far from the Big East media deal that just came out, it has a lot of exposure. So
Game Time makes getting to the ballpark even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, and their best price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. They're obsessed with finding ways to help you save money on tickets. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event. Have you heard how many times I've said the word tickets? They're obsessed with them. Find exclusive flash deals and sponsored deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. There, I said it again. And the Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price on tickets. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the free app, and new users can get $20 off their first purchase with code Locked On. Terms apply. That's code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase with Game Time. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, the lowest price guaranteed.
He was a single shy of a cycle. I mean, a single. That's crazy to me. But Rhys Hines, when you're as hot as Rhys Hines is at the plate right now, you can't be bothered by only getting one base. He's got 5 hits in his first 2 career games, all of them for extra bases. He's kicking butt up at the plate, and I love it. But we're not going to do this thing. We're not going to get into any sort of grandiose claims about the future of Rhys Hines, but he sure seems like the real deal in a small sample size. When I mean small sample size, I'm talking about 2 games here, so we're not going to go too crazy. But man, have I enjoyed these 2 games. 2 doubles, a triple, 2 homers, one of them 450 feet, the other almost 460 feet, and he's got a couple of RBIs to boot. This guy has come up and been absolutely bonkers, absolutely redonkulous. Let's just think of all of the different words here, all of the different metaphors we can use for how good he has been at the plate. And quite frankly, there's definitely caution to be had, because it feels like the Rockies are just like, all right, sure, there's some guy coming up, whatever. Throw him a bunch of strikes, let him get himself out. And he's not doing that. He's hitting the ball a country mile. He hit 2 balls. I think it was his double. Anyway, there were 2 exit velocities over 110 miles an hour last night. Woo! And I saw on, speaking of the extra metrics and things like that, the new bat speed metric that they came up with, they can measure how quickly a bat is swung through the strike zone by a given hitter. He is up there with the likes of Giancarlo Stanton and O'Neal Cruz and the guys that swing the bat the hardest. He swings his bat almost 77 miles an hour. You talk about the power that he can generate. It's just phenomenal. And the results are undeniable. I mean, talking about the extra bases and stuff, he has the most total bases in the first 2 games of his career since they started tracking game logs. Like you can only go back to 1901, right? Baseball was played before then, we know, especially being the first professional baseball city, but only up to 1901 do they do game logs. So looking at that, he has 15 total bases in his first 2 games. Nobody else has more than that. Up until at this point, Emmett Hedrick, a center fielder for the St. Louis Cardinals back in 1901, had 14 total bases in his first 2 games. And I say first 2 games and not first 2 career games because Emmett Hedrick actually played a couple of years before 1901. It's just this was the first year that game logs was a thing. So literally first year that game logs was a thing, we had to set the record for most total bases in the first 2 games until Rhys Hines came along this year. What's that? 123? Yeah, 123 years that this record has stood. You also look at, and this list was provided on Twitter by Codify. There's some other names on here that you're not going to know. I mean, Francisco Arcia from the Los Angeles Angels, don't remember this name at all. From 2018, he was a catcher. He literally played that 1 year. Has never played in the majors again, but he had 13 total bases in his first 2 career games. Joe Cunningham, another St. Louis Cardinal, back in 1954, also had 13 total bases. A couple of names you will know had 12 total bases in their first 2 career games. Trevor Story, who started with the Colorado Rockies. He's now a Boston Red Sox, but started with the Rockies. Yasiel Puig, remember him. Manny Machado for the Orioles and Ian Desmond for the Nationals. All those guys had 12 in their first 2 career games. And then you go all the way back to 1965, the American League Rookie of the Year, who I think we all remember so very well, Kurt Blefary, outfielder for the Baltimore Orioles. Yeah, Rhys Hines has more total bases than all of those guys in his first 2 career games. We're not going to go crazy with this and say, oh, he's the second coming of Babe Ruth. He's Frank Robinson and Joe Morgan and Pete Rose all put into one. We're not going to do that. But man, it's been fun. And let's look at this because we as Reds fans have been spoiled. I hope you know this. And quite frankly, if you're newer to the team, don't expect this to always happen. Because quite frankly, we went through multiple years of debuts that were nothing. But these last couple of years, we've seen some crazy debuts. Obviously, the biggest one was Ellie De La Cruz. His first 2 career games, he was 3 for 7, so he didn't have as many hits as Rhys Hines. In fact, nobody on the current roster in their first 2 games had as many hits as Rhys Hines in his first 2 games. At least, of this current core of the team. Ellie De La Cruz, 3 for 7. He had a double, a triple, a homer, 2 RBIs, and 2 walks. Matt McClain, he was 2 for 8 with a double, an RBI, and a walk. CES was 2 for 6 with a homer and 3 RBIs. Noelvi Marte was 2 for 8 with a double and a steal. Which, by the way, of this group, there's a little trivia for you to take to your friends and be like, hey, look, I know about the Reds. Did you know that of all the guys on the team, the only guy to get a steal in his first 2 career games wasn't Ellie? Wasn't even McClain. It was Marte. Yeah, anyway, piece of trivia there for you. And then we go all the way back to Spencer Steer in 2022, 2 for 5 with a double, a homer, and 3 walks. Fantastic debut for him. Rhys Hines beats them all out. These first 2 games have been so much fun. And Rhys Hines has been a breath of fresh and powerful air. And quite frankly, he has led a bit of a catharsis for this lineup. A revival, if you will, because even the bottom third of the lineup got in on the revival on Tuesday night.